Ryan Pike, the managing editor of Flames Nation, joins us. You're snickering. I'll get to the snickering in a second. Unfortunately, I feel bad because young Gavin, our producer, is searching around looking for a graphic that he thought I said I sent to him. I didn't. So, Gav, slow down. It's okay, buddy. There was no. He's all upset because he can't find it. I never sent it. That's why he can't find it. Okay. You're the guru when it comes to the new building. You're the man in all of this. Do you think that NHL teams should have some latitude in terms of the size of their building and the ice surface?
That's a good question. I'm leaning no, if only because I think the challenge would be if you do it smaller, it also limits the types of events you can host. So I think they err on the side of making it a little bit more flexible and larger.
And what events would you? I mean, probably international hockey, right? Or National Hockey League, but baseball did it with the World Baseball Classic. Can't you get past it?
I think there's less organization or internal organization with baseball venues than there is for hockey.
Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, let's just think this whole thing through. So you're going to spend 3 years.
Well, I'll say this. Say this. Do you know why the New York Islanders were playing in Nassau for as long as they were after initially going into the new Brooklyn building? Because it was one of those buildings where it was built just for basketball.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was,
sure.
You couldn't see a third of the ice.
You couldn't. Same thing in Arizona. You had, when they originally went down there, they played where the Suns.
At the America West Arena.
Right. And it was a basketball facility. Yeah. But I'm talking about, I cut my teeth in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League in Estevan. And the Estevan building, Bruins building, was built the exact same dimensions as the Boston Garden was, the original Boston Garden. Meanwhile, up the road in Wilcox, home of the Notre Dame Hounds, Per Athol Murray built an Olympic-size ice surface. So in the span of an hour and a half, you could play in the biggest and the smallest rinks in Saskatchewan. And when we played in the playoffs, both teams fought like hell to get home ice advantage. They were always 7-game series, and the home team on home ice won. But can you imagine just for a second right now, if you had that flexibility, what the conversations would be like at the Saddle Dome right now about the new building? Like, what do you want to commit yourself to? Right?
Yeah.
Because the Jays, if the Jays have brought the fences in, it's to accommodate home runs and hitting. Well, it works both ways, right? It's going to accommodate it'll accommodate Aaron Judge just as much as it will Guerrero, right?
Yeah.
But if you built if the Flames said, you know what, screw it, the next event center, we're going to have ice that's going to be 190 by 85, right?
Well, you know who actually had a shorter rink than most, right?
Who's that?
The old Chicago Stadium where Darryl used to play.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was 15 feet shorter than most rinks.
Right. And I believe in Finland is Finnish ice not kind of a hybrid ice between NHL and Olympic?
I believe
right.
So. There's sort of that weird middle ground.
Right. There's that weird middle ground.
The rest of Europe is 200. It was like 200 by 100, but it's just Finland. I think it depends on the venue.
Yeah, it might be.
It's very much a hodgepodge.
But I would like that. I would like to be able to pick my ice surface. However, if you picked Olympic ice, let's say, if you were the Oilers and you picked Olympic ice, how do you think old McDavid and Draisaitl would like that? Right?
Or do you want to go a little bit narrower or shorter so that they can't get up to top speed?
Well, you want them to no. Well, maybe that's what you do here. You build there you go. You build a rink, you design a rink to slow down McDavid and Draisaitl, and they're gone in 5 years or whatever, right? And then you're stuck for 35 years with the dimensions that you've chosen. Having said that, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm good. It seems once again like there's no shortage of newsy topics in this here market.
Oh, why? What have you heard?
I mean, unfortunately, our friends at the Calgary Hitmen got eliminated by the Red Deer Rebels. They put up a heck of a fight. I think they were facing an uphill battle, but they had a good run. And, that Yaremchuk kid's having a good year.
He is.
He's starting to get some draft buzz. The folks at the Athletic, I think Scott Wheeler included a Hitman or two on his prospective 2024 list. So good for them. Junior hockey is very much a star-driven endeavor, both in terms of business and in terms
I
of
don't know what
winning.
you're speaking about. Connor Bedard, you say Game 7 tonight.
I've never heard of that player
Yeah.
before. Is he any
Yeah,
good?
I agree.
So I mean, those kind of things.
Yep.
You know, we had the Wranglers win their 50th game of the year. I believe 40 wins for some goaltender they have.
We're going to talk about him on this hit today for sure.
I think Matthew Phillips is a game-winning goal away from setting the American League single season record.
Yep.
They are, I believe, as of this morning's refresh of the standings, the Wranglers are 3 points away, either 3 points gained by them in their 3 remaining games against the Abbotsford Canucks, or 3 lost points by the Coachella Valley Firebirds away from clinching first place in the league. They get a trophy for that, and they also get a first round bye. So, you know, it's fairly newsy. And then we have the National Hockey League Club, which are white knuckling it right now, and we'll see how long they can hold on for.
So interesting let's talk about the big club first. Are they white knuckling, or is it just kind of not official yet? I kind of came away from that game. I started the show today, dude, and I don't know how many times all of us have said it combined. If we all put a quarter in, we could probably build the new arena. But in so many ways, Saturday's game was the season in a nutshell, right? Like another one of those nutshell games. Having said that, the only thing that I would grant them is this was not, Joe Smith, backup goaltender in Pawtucket, who came up to make his first NHL start, spun on his head and spit wooden nickels. Demko was good.
And it's also, I mean, this, second game in a row, second game in 9 days against arguably your biggest regular season rival. You can make a case for LA. You can make a case for Edmonton as well in terms of, but I think,
in terms of playoff, they haven't played anybody anymore than they played.
I think historically, I think in terms of just important regular season games,
absolutely.
Johnny Gaudreau makes his NHL debut and scores a goal against the Canucks.
Assisted by?
Who was it?
Chris Breen.
The Breen Giant.
Yep.
Good man, Chris Breen.
Very former captain of the Providence Bruins.
Very tall man.
Very tall man.
6'7"?
Yeah, something like that.
Built like the Green Giant.
That's exactly.
The Green Giant, because hockey locker rooms are not particularly creative with their nicknames.
No, they're not.
It was perfect. I couldn't think of a better name for that guy. But the Flames had the line brawl in 2013 that really, I think, crystallized their identity and really made them, I think, a team rather than a bunch of guys playing with the same sweater. I'll
do you one better, because to me it's more important than anything, is the Trevor Linden retirement. That was the first time I'd ever seen a visiting team go across and shake the hand of an honor.
Because one guy wearing the C wearing 12 said, "Boys, we're gonna go do this." And everyone's like, "Okay."
And now it's fairly common, and I like it. But it was started by the Flames, right, in Vancouver.
Yeah. So, like, a lot of really important, like capital I important things have happened for the Flames against the Canucks. But I mean, if you're the Canucks, you a week prior, you felt like you let one get away. I don't think they particularly love the high sticking call in the third period, but I mean, they also got scored on. Like, if they have that penalty, if they kill a penalty against a Flames power play that wasn't particularly great in that game, they probably feel better about it, but they felt like they wouldn't get away. And they come in, they have the Hirose kid on the blue line, who is very good. Aiden McDonough, who didn't play on Saturday, but played in the previous game, one of their up and comers. Like, they have a lot, they put in basically, a lineup full of guys pushing for jobs, or guys who they have really high hopes for. And, they played well, and they took it to the Flames early. The Flames were habitually flat, and the Canucks went, "Oh, these guys are going to play like this. Let's just win on them." And they took advantage of some turnovers. They took advantage of some penalties. They took advantage of some sloppy play. And the Flames, for the first, I'd say 35 to 40 minutes, were the second best team in the ice. And then they, for the umpteenth time, came out of the locker room in the third period going, "Oh crap, it's 2-0. And give the Flames credit. I mean, they're in a position where they absolutely had to get something out of that game. A win would have been much better for them. But they needed to get something out of that game to have any chance in hell of staying alive through the weekend. And they pulled it off. Their power play wasn't very good. They 5-on-5, they were the better team in the third period, but in the first half of the game, it was sort of a saw off. And I thought the first 2/3 of the game, they did not play a very good road game. And then the third period, they played a very good road game, and they salvaged a point. But how many times have we, had this conversation of what, I was talking in the other room with the gentleman doing social and clips.
Jack, yeah.
Jack, yeah, very nice young man.
Yep.
But we were talking, and he was clipping Pinder and Boomer clips, and he was brought up the 52 1-goal games this year, and they've only won 20. So they've gotten in 1-goal games, they've gotten I think it's I think they're 20-16 and 16 in 1-goal games. If you include empty goals that, games that were 2-1 and then they scored an empty netter. So they're not really 1-goal games because it was a 1-goal game with goalies involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 52, 120 of them got nothing out of 16, got 1 point out of another 16. That is a tremendous amount of money left on the table.
It is. And I think it speaks to something that Daryl identified early on. I don't know if we all appreciated it necessarily when he said it, because I think we were all kind of thinking, well, he's being critical, but the team doesn't have a game breaker.
Nope. The way they play, I mean, you could say Toffoli's the closest thing they have to a game breaker.
Yep.
But, the way they play a very structured, grinding game, and it relies on consistency and discipline. And both those things are really, really tough, especially if you're not getting the results that you think you should be getting. And so, if you look at the best games they played, I think I would point to, a couple of the games they played against Vegas. I think they were unfortunate to lose, but I think they played very well against Vegas. But I was thinking specifically that the home game they played against Los Angeles, the 2-1 win. And they were LA just never really got going, and the Flames were, they figured out a way to not let them get going. And then they said, okay, we're going to dictate the way this game is played. And we've seen that at times, but I think we've only really seen that for full games, maybe less than 10 times.
Well, to get the results, right? Yeah. Like I would look at that Boston game or the Rangers game after. I mean, there was 2 games after the All-Star break in which they were, one was a really good road game. Can make an argument they deserved a better fate, but the best team in the history of the regular season, 63 wins by the Boston Bruins. They dominated them at home, still managed to find a way not to win.
Yeah. And, if I think the big challenge, like obviously on the website, when this eventually turns into what we all think it will be, we'll do some obituaries. You don't do obituaries on a patient that's still alive, unfortunately, but that'll come. But I think one of the themes will be, the Flames were an excellent to borderline elite possession team.
Yeah.
But the thing they struggled with is the last 10 feet in either zone. They're
absolutely
the middle 180 feet. Excellent. Like they're when they're at their best, they transition well, they cycle the puck, they hold on to the puck, they're patient, they're just very exacting and tactical.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is the mistakes they've made this season in the last 10 feet and the first 10 feet have completely made what the gains they've made in the other 180 not really mean as much.
I think that's a really astute observation. I think it's the best way to put it. The start in 10 and the finishing 10.
And I think that's if you're a fan of the club, I think that's probably that might be one of the things that makes them the most frustrating because the shape of their game is excellent. The details in those 2 areas though aren't.
Yeah. I have brought this up to you before. I have no way of proving my theory, but whenever anybody brings up their 16 overtime losses or shootout losses or the 1-goal games, I mean, that was as fun in overtime. It was weird in overtime, 90 seconds of nothing. And then the last was just, let's set everybody's hair on fire. And it was fantastic. I contend the one thing I would always want to know about this particular season was, could Matthew Phillips have made a difference in that scenario? I don't think Matthew Phillips was necessarily going to make a difference in a big, heavy game like the LA game. But in a game like that...
Case in point, Vancouver benched Kuzmenko for the better part of the third period. First guy over the boards for the shootout.
Right.
And I mean, Kuzmenko, is he a player? Is he a complete NHL player? I'd say no.
Right.
Is he a player that could help a team like Vancouver win? Yes.
Yeah.
Is Vancouver, a team that's not currently in the playoff mix and hasn't been in a while? Do they have the luxury of being able to address a guy like that? Oh yeah, of course. It's a sort of a different situation. But I think in terms of just sort of figuring out the roles that you want to fill on your team.
But your power play wasn't good enough when it needed to be. Again, that astute line of the 10 feet. Why wasn't Matthew Phillips given a legitimate opportunity? Again, he may turn out to be Austin Czarnik, and that's not a knock against Austin Czarnik, who's a really nice kid, really good kid.
And carved out a pretty good pro career, all things considered.
Right, but isn't a full-time NHLer.
Yeah.
And maybe that's going to be what happens to Matt Phillips in 2 or 3 years. People can go, see, you were wrong. I might be wrong, But that's the one thing that haunts me about this year.
Yeah. Well, there's let's do the quick math. 23 full-time gigs in the NHL, 32 teams. That's about 700 or so NHL jobs.
Yeah.
And so you can make a good case that Matthew Phillips is one of the top 800 players in the world in the sport he plays.
Yeah.
That the last 700 gigs are the toughest gigs to get and keep.
Yep.
And there's plenty of really, really good players who circle the airport, like Crash Davis.
Yeah, no,
circle
great.
the airport, can't land.
Right.
There's plenty of guys like that. There's plenty of them who have been in this organization, and
right.
Some of it is, the guys on Barnburn have talked about, could Phillips turn into another Marty St. Louis? Could be, but Marty St. Louis, when I was here, when he was here, Marty St. Louis didn't blow the doors off. Marty St. Louis made it very easy to get rid of Marty St. Louis.
100%.
I would make a case that in terms of guys who aren't at that level yet, Phillips, his boxcars, his performance at the level below has been much better than Marty St. Louis was.
And I go back to, and not everybody agrees with this take. And, what you have really illustrated too, by the way, is that, when you listen to Daryl Sutter and you play his system, analytically, it can be effective for the most part. The tail end, beginning, the goalies, I think, were a different story, which is a long way of me getting to, I wonder about the role of the modern day coach. If the modern day coach doesn't have to be more of a teacher than he has been in the past, or more open to players. I think the one thing you can say about Brad Treliving, if you coach for Brad Treliving, you get a really healthy say in player conversations.
Yeah,
that's been Hartley didn't like Berchi, so Berchi was gone. Right.
And again, Berchi, he made it easy for them to not keep him around. I vividly think back to the Brian Burke 200-foot or there's 3 zones you got to play in comment he made when we asked him about him. And I think in 2014 or 2015.
But I'm not trying to out anybody, and I don't say this trying to be a dink about this. But did you or somebody at Flames Nation not write a story about the compelling argument to trade Michael Backlund like 7-8 years ago when he was a youngster?
Yeah, there was compelling.
That happened. So that's my point. Is you're right about Berchi, but the job of Barb Hartley wasn't to run him out of town. It was to make it work. Yeah. And I think the job of Daryl Sutter wasn't to say he's too small. It was to make it work. At least that's how I think.
I think it depends. Not knowing what.
I'm not trying to be
not knowing what the marching orders are from up on high. I mean, the optics seem to be, especially, the marching orders I believe Brad was given was get in the mix quick. And so a lot of the things they did were early on trying to make moves to turn the rebuild into, okay, you're close. Okay, you're closer. Okay. And sort of get that progression very quickly.
I agree.
And in that case though, like if you think, like, say, if you're the 14-15 Flames, you're the Find Away Flames, you have some runway to
did that team damage this organization more than we know? Did it not give one of the most incredible false sense of security?
I think the case be made because if you're, I think I love this phrase, and I always appreciate Jay Feaster for introducing it. Intellectual honesty.
Yes,
being clear about what are you doing here, and what are you?
Yep.
And I think the biggest challenge is when you're winning, even if you're winning ugly,
you
the rose colored glasses probably look extra rosy. And when you're losing, even if you're right there, everything seems like, the sky is falling. Like,
I agree.
It's a results-driven industry. So I think a lot of time it's really tough to divorce yourself from the results and get into the process. And I think that's probably one of the things that, has really driven the rise of the analytics movement in professional sports, having people be like, okay, but why are you losing? Like, if the idea is, you're losing, you're wildly outplaying, but your power play is no good. Okay, that's a reason. You can fix that. That could be tactics. That could be personnel. Like, you can figure out what you don't have.
Yeah.
And I think the big challenge is, I'd say, I think the big challenge is overcorrecting, because we've seen the Flames coaching staff, Bob Hartley was a taskmaster. Okay. Players stopped responding to that. Okay. So you get Gulletson, who's much more of a player's coach. But there's, we had the same thing after Daryl left. When Daryl stopped being the head coach, you go to Jim Playfair, who was much more of a player's coach than Daryl was. And then, oh, okay, that's not quite working. So you overcorrect another direction and
bring in Mike Keenan.
Yeah, bring in Mike Keenan. And then, okay, that doesn't work as well. So then you go and you bring in Brent Sutter. Okay, how is that working? Well, it doesn't work as well. And then you go to Hartley. And then it's sort of been the oscillation between hard asses and
players coaches.
Yeah, and I think now especially the role of, I think the Flames have been very good at recruiting and developing really smart young players and very smart young coaches. I mean, Ryan Huska is an up and comer. He interviewed, I believe, this past offseason was in Detroit. He was a runner up for that position from what I'm told.
Yeah.
And, he's got a reputation. Mitch Love is probably going to win or be a strong contender for his second consecutive Coach of the Year award, coaching the best team in the regular season, a team that I think they lost something like, they scored 240 goals the year before. 140 of those goals walked out the door in the, between the start of between the playoffs, the start of the regular season. And they're better than they were a year ago with, on paper, what should be a worse team. And a lot of things went well. A lot of guys developed well. Cale McLean, another guy they brought up. So I think, that's my long way of saying, I'm really curious if they can get creative, because we've seen, the advent of associate coaches. We've seen the advent of maybe young head coaches. We've seen the model in hockey ops with the new GM and a president of hockey ops or vice president of hockey ops that, the Flames did that with Brian Burke. They had Brian Burke, and Brian really wanted to bring in, the only guy he talked to for the job formally was Brad Treliving. And he told this story, basically told Ken King, hey, I'll interview him. He'll come meet you guys. If you guys hate him, I'll talk to somebody else. But this is the guy.
That's the guy I want. Yeah.
And so, but they thought it was really important, beforehand, like they had Brian on as an interim guy, and they just like the idea of having Brian as a resource. Brian knew everybody, so it would help if he needed anybody to help him connect with people. But just having somebody who's done the job and having a veteran guy, and I think potentially, could you see a young head coach with like a Kirk Muller as associate coach? Maybe you do want to have like a veteran head coach with a really young staff that he can develop. Maybe. I think a lot of it depends on what you want to do, but I think a lot of the conversation will stem from the whole what went wrong thing from this season, because the thing I think that makes me anxious is the idea of overcorrecting, where it's like, okay, you have a team that's I think 4th in the league in expected goals percentage, but they're just they got bad goaltending and they couldn't finish. Okay, the last 10 feet. Make sure you don't throw away the 180 feet that worked really, really well. And how do you figure out ways to really address the last 10 and the first 10? Because if you can, if it's just sort of, oh, you need to make a tactical tweak on your blue line group, or how your forward support your defense or whatever, that fixes one end. And then if you fix one or the other, you're probably good enough to make it. You're probably good enough to be a very good team. It's just I think there's some challenges. Lots of teams are unlucky in one way or the other. The Flames are unlucky in both. I don't think unlucky absolves them of the mistakes they made in those areas.
No.
And I think that'll be the challenge, sort of divorcing the puck luck from the gaffes, from the mistakes, from the structural stuff.
Your wording, I like your wording a lot, because the overcorrection part, really hit home. And I've been chewing on this for, a week now, which was Daryl Sutter becoming the all-time, coaching record for games by the Flames at 401. And that's in 2 stints. And one guy
and two part-time years too.
And the one guy did it for 400, who's considered, arguably the best coach here in Calgary. But the organization's been in Calgary for 40 years, and 400 is your benchmark.
Yeah. And since Bob Johnson left, they've never had a coach for more than 4 years.
Right. And I keep going back to John Cooper. Why are you going to John Cooper? Because John Cooper, if I remember correctly, was a young available coach in the American Hockey League when Hartley was hired. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have taken Hartley.
I think he was still in Syracuse back then. I think he was early in his crunch phase.
But I think
when Tampa was bringing him along.
But I think people knew who he was, right? Yeah. That sort of thing. Now he's been in Tampa for 10 years. Is he a hard ass? Is he a player's coach?
A little of both.
A little bit of both. I keep going back, and I had this conversation with Matt Larkin from the Daily Faceoff last week, and I just had it with Patterson, so I don't know why I wouldn't have it with you. I think the secret to coaching now is to get somebody in the middle, and you really rely on your leadership group. I think your leadership group has more of a role now to play as a communicator of team structure, right? And that's how you have longevity as a coach. You don't burn out yelling and screaming and all and being too friendly.
Well, I mean, all due respect to the guys involved, but Glenn Gulletson didn't play high-end professional hockey. So I think, and I think that was the problem that Jim Playfair had at times, where you have at some points, guys who haven't played or guys who didn't play a ton have credibility problems, which it happens.
Cooper's a lawyer.
Yeah, but I think the other thing is, like, if you're John Cooper, you go into that room and you can be like, hey, I've coached all of you before. Like, I don't like, if you're an AHL player, you're not going to go to management and be like, who the hell is this guy to tell me what to do? So if you're the Flames, you can bring in guys who, all due respect to them as coaches, did not have great professional careers. I mean, Ryan Huska as a coach, he's an exceptional coach. He's one of my favorite people to talk about hockey with, because he's just got a mind for it. So does Love, so does Huska, or so does Cale McLean. And they all come in with a really unique perspective. And sure, they didn't have a lot of success as pros, but I think they have a really good perspective and some self-awareness about what didn't work for them and what can work at other levels. And Ryan Huska, if you're an AHL player, if you go to your manager and go, if you think anyone went to Brad and went, I don't know, this guy didn't really do much in the NHL, why am I listening to him? No, you're going, okay, I'm 20, 21, 22 years old. This guy has some success at other levels of coaching. I'm going to listen to this guy. And then they had success. And then I think gradually, if the culture of the team is, we don't care who you are, we just like good ideas. And then your coaching staff is full of, like, I'll say this, I think it helps the Flames. I mean, I'll say this, the areas where the Flames have done well, I think for tactics, are the blue line group, because they've sort of had a hodgepodge of guys, and the penalty kill. And both of them are the things that Huska's in charge of. And both of them have a lot of young guys that Huska coach at other levels. So I don't think Dylan Dubé goes into the PK, or Mangiapane or any of the blue liners goes there and going like, I don't know why he wants us to do the check press. What does this guy know? They go and going, well, I had this guy a couple of years ago and he was awesome. I'm going to listen to him because we had success. Or he made me better. And I think if you have an entire locker room full of guys who are indoctrinated to that type of thinking, I think it makes things gel together a lot better. That said, there's a lot of different ways to be successful. I mean, I'm sure there's still a lot of really, hard ass coaches in the NHL who sort of are part of the old school who have success. I don't know how much longevity they have, because, like you said, if your entire, I think Bob Hartley is a good example. Bob Hartley was brought in to teach a very young group with very little amounts of NHL experience and established talent how to be pros. And so you can say, hey, we need you to play this way, work hard, habits. That'll get you so far. But once you hit the ceiling of where hard work and habits can get you, and you go, okay, coach, we're kind of bumping up our heads against this. What do we do? And his trump card is to say, work harder. At a certain point, if someone says to you, Rob, you need to work harder, you're like, that's your coach. So you need to have something more than that. And similarly, I think once you have, a group that has good habits and has a good mindset and has, an orientation towards that kind of success, I think it makes it a lot easier for them to be open-minded about this. But it needs to sort of be something that happens at all the different levels, so that by the time you get to the NHL level, you're not going, well, what's going on here? You have to be sort of used to it.
So are you alluding to there being a coaching change this offseason?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. I have no idea either.
I think Frank Saravalli on various programs, if it's alluded to, I think on the DFO rundown, I think he alluded to, like, there's a chance neither of them is back. I personally don't think that both the current coach and the current GM are back next season.
And the Kingmaker's the owner.
It's one or the other.
The Kingmaker's
could be neither.
The Kingmaker's the owner. It's gonna go right up to the top. What Murray Edwards wants to do.
And if I signed a head coach to a 2-year extension, and then it became evident to me during the year before the extension that it might not be a good fit, if I think I can win more or be more financially successful with somebody else, I'll just cut a check. If
I want to be your friend.
Well, that's the thing though. If someone comes to me with a plan saying, okay, here's a roadmap for getting the team back on track. But the catch is, it's a good plan, but you need to cut a check. If the plan's good enough, I'm cutting a check. But the plan's got to be good. Especially if I'm also cutting a check for a building that's probably going to be 9 figures. I don't want to be spending too much of my money all. So,
I'm sorry. Did you just say 9 figures?
That's what it was last time.
Yes, you're right. Sorry.
9
Yeah.
figures.
Okay. Sorry. 10 figures is where we would have.
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think anyone's cutting a check
math.
for 10
Remember,
figures.
they told me I did not have to do math when I came back, so that took me a while. Completely different topic. If the NBA play-in rules were adopted, this is a preview tonight, is it not?
I think so. This is what, team 9 and 10?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is anybody talking about this? And I'm not. I'm not, Ryan. I'm not promoting it. I'm not saying, oh, the locals aren't in, so let's build them a path. I happen to notice that the Raptors are playing on Wednesday against Chicago. It's a play-in game. It's in the NBA. Is anybody talking about that right now?
I think probably more in the media than in the Board of Governors. I think the current commissioner, and more than likely a fair amount of the Board of Governors, if it's coming from the commissioner, probably like it the way it is. I mean, if you're a traditionalist, I mean, 16 teams, 8-8. It's the math is easy. It's the top half of every
okay,
group.
but let me debunk that for a second. If you're a traditionalist in 16 teams, remember 16 teams got in when there were 21 teams.
Oh yeah.
Now so it's gone from a real healthy percentage, I'll let you do the math, to 50%.
Yeah.
Right? So don't talk to me about tradition. Let me talk to you about business. If let's assume, because I do not see Rogers continuing on the path, but in the next television negotiation, does TSN want a play-in game? Does TSN want, because when does the season end? Friday?
Yeah.
So there's nothing.
And it only ends Friday because Nashville had a water main break and they had to reschedule a bunch of games.
Right. So there's nothing on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So if you're TSN, yeah, we'll pay you, but not unlike the NFL and the NBA negotiations is, we also want to create a little programming here. So we would like playing games on Saturday.
I think that was, we talked about tradition. The All-Star game used to be a hallowed tradition of, whatever. And then someone came up with the cool idea, like, hey, it'd be cool. We like 3-on-3 overtime. We talked into doing 3-on-3 in the regular season. And everyone loves it. Let's just 3-on-3 in the All-Star game. That'd be kind of wacky and fun. And so I contend
they stole that from Colin Patterson, our previous guest, and Perry Bearzan, the old SO 3-on-3 pond hockey.
They don't care whether they find good ideas.
No, they do not. No, they do not.
But I think that's one of the things. Like I think the challenge would be, I think if you tell them, hey, the All-Star game doesn't count for the standings for anyone, literally nothing is achieved by this outside of having goofy fun. I think it makes it easy to double down on making it 3-on-3 or having a draft or doing whatever, because you're like, it doesn't matter anyway, so let's just have some fun with it.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge with the NHL is they feel the regular season is hallowed, and it's like, when I'm on team keep it the way it is, or keep it very similar.
And I know I'm going to get skewed on this, but me too. I'm building you a scenario in which TSN or whoever, they just did those deals. So the next one up is the Canadian deal. So that's why I'm picking on Bell. Yeah. But Bell goes, you know what? Now, if you give us 2 games at the end of the season on a Saturday, which we don't normally own, right? That's a Rogers and CBC property. But if you're going to give us play-in games, we won't like it, but we'll damn well watch it. And you and I both know those would be big ratings games.
Yeah. Hey, look at the World Baseball Classic.
Right.
It means absolutely nothing. Doesn't have a lot of built-in prestige outside of what they built themselves. But people, that's gonna be a point of viewing for people next year or next time they do it, based on how well this one went.
Sure.
So I think.
And can I charge playoff prices for the tickets?
If you can sell them, I think that'd be the experiment.
You don't think
NHL teams used to not do very well pricing for home dates, but then, because they found that they can fill the building if they make tiers of home dates and say, oh, well,
dynamic
Edmonton,
pricing.
Yeah. So I think this would be an extension of that, and B, you need to test it out. But I think, as much as I feel we have an 82 game play-in round already, if you can sell it as, how is this better? Like if I'm like hardcore hockey fans like me, like you, we're going to watch it regardless. You're not going to bristle. Like, we'd be watching regardless. Like the last weekend of the season, the first weekend of the playoffs, we're watching because it's what we do.
I guess I'm more influenced by Thursday Night Football. Like, if you strip all of the BS away, who thinks Thursday Night Football is good? Nobody. right? It's Sunday to Thursday. Well, maybe the back end of it's okay, but nobody wants to play, in that compacted schedule. They had god awful games for years, and then now it's on a freaking over the top provider. But man, they got the money for it, and they do things based on the money. And it seems to me, didn't they add a play-in in the NFL this year too?
I can't remember.
I think they did, and I think ESPN got that.
I think part of the expansion of the wild card was a response, both in baseball and in football, to money. So
okay, no play-in for NFL. I apologize. They added extra teams. Is that what they did?
I think they expanded the wild card.
I think that's what it was. Okay.
But yeah, it's essentially that. But it's like, okay, more
extra
teams,
playoffs,
more teams staying longer, so the games are more meaningful longer. Like I think that was one of the ingenious things about adding the overtime loss, because take away the overtime loss, we're not even talking about a playoff race here.
Oh no.
And
I laugh because people complain about it. Well, what do you want? I mean, ultimately, you're a business, so you want your team. This is the best possible scenario for the Calgary Flames. If you're not going to make the playoffs, is to have every game meaningful down to the end.
Yeah,
and God help you,
have your fans have to rely on us for complicated math,
right? Which I've proven I cannot do. No, and again, I cannot stress this enough. I am not advocating for it. I am not. I like it the way it is. I have no problem with, I'm not sure I like the divisional stuff.
I mean, part of it is like the AHL wanted to have expanded playoffs because they want to have more games because it helps guys get developmental reps. But a lot of like the AHL for a lot of things, the test bed for the National Hockey League, same as the East Coast League. So
is it? What's going on down there? Did you hear like Chicago's now going independent?
Yeah.
Apparently
but even just the idea, like, the Wranglers are fighting for a bye. They get a first round bye in the Pacific Division because the AHL wants to have teams playing a lot and also wants to experiment a bit.
Right.
And so if right now, if it weren't for this race, I don't think there'd be a lot of fan interest in the Coachella Valley team because they're so far away. And, you only see them a handful of times. So I don't think there's a real rivalry built yet.
Sure.
But things like this help.
Yeah.
But you're also going, okay, if you're, the last couple of home games, you're thinking, all right, so if the Wranglers win this one, win one or two more, they get a bye and they get home ice advantage and they get this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's some stakes. That's some stakes that weren't there before.
Right.
And I think experimenting with building those kind of things in at the minor league level can do a lot to see what works and what doesn't, and what does and doesn't move the needle in terms of fan interest, in terms of ticket moving, all kinds of stuff.
Well, I'm right there with you. I really feel that the NHL's dropped the ball on using the American Hockey League the proper way. The American Hockey League should have been playing 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime for the last 2 years.
The ECHL is playing 7.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
No,
kind of fun though, right?
That's what you should be, right? You should. I remember when the 04-05 lockout, I went up to Edmonton and watched the Roadrunners because they put in the fat blue lines, and I wanted to see what that was going to be like. Right?
How was that?
It was good. I mean, if you're a smart defenseman, a Letang or an Anderson or somebody like that, or at that time Lidstrom, it's just extra space, right? Because you're still on side. But we for whatever reason, the minute you say, "Oh my God, we're going to do this," and God bless him, Craig Button has the ultimate comeback to this. Oh, I'm old school. How old school? You still want the Rover? Like, how far are we going back here? Right? You want the Rover? Let's get the Rover. I'm all for the Rover. Hey, bring the Rover back.
Hey,
I just think that the American Hockey League, I think there's two things going on. I think there's a coup going on in the American Hockey League, from what I gather.
There's some teams that do not like current leadership for some reason.
Right. And one's now going to be an independent team. What the hell? Why? Like, it's not like somebody in AAA baseball goes, enough of this.
And that means we're going to get at least one shared affiliate. It'll be weird because I hate shared affiliates.
Share affiliates does. And you know what? And then the Chicago Wolves will be saying, yeah, sure, we'll take your player, but who is it? Right? Who do we want? You can bet that the Chicago Wolves will become the Wade Redden depository, that where you want to go and shed some salary and dump a guy in the American League, they're all going to end up playing for the Chicago Wolves.
I'd be fascinated to sort of get a look at revenues for AHL team, because I bet you Chicago's up near the top, if not at the top. And they probably feel emboldened to call their shots.
Oh, no, 100% they do. Them and Hershey. You watch. Hershey's the next team that'll do it too.
Yeah.
And Hershey's always been the history on that is there's a
because Hershey's what, Washington?
Yeah. But they used to be.
That's a long-standing relationship.
That's
too.
a long-standing. But they used to be an independent with an affiliation.
I think Providence probably does pretty well.
Providence would be another one. Yeah, for sure.
Hartford maybe. There's a few New England teams that don't have their own full-time teams that do pretty well there and have some good in-market cachet.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the one here and good cachet before we get to that. Numbers. Exactly how good is the season that Dustin Wolf is putting up?
I'd say generational. He's very good. I'll give the Blue Liners in front of him credit. I mean, the team defense in the first month or so of the season was sort of all over the place, and then they've really done a good job tidying it up. They've had some injuries on the back end. They've had some guys float back and forth. Dennis Gilbert, arguably the most consistent defenseman, has been in the NHL since January. So, I mean, they lost probably their most reliable guy, but, Ilya Slavyov has taken a big step. I think, DeSimone's game has really steadied out after sort of being a little bit shaky early on.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Maloche has really taken a step. I think he was out for a little bit with a minor injury, but now he's back. Like they've gotten a lot of stuff out of the veterans, and I think some of their young guys are taking some big steps. I mean, I think Poirier's maybe, Jeremy Poirier's maybe another half season playing, showing up his defensive game to be pretty good. I think Kuznetsov's getting there. I don't think his offensive game isn't quite as strong. So I think there might be a little bit less appetite to try him out. But I mean, they've been working on a lot of things, and I'll give Mitch Love credit. Like Mitch Love, if you have a bad game or two, he just pulls you out. He doesn't care who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're Jeremy Poirier had a couple of rough games, out of the lineup, and a couple guys at that. So I think that's a bold thing to do, and you can do it when you have the respect and the trust of your room, because you don't expect no one's going to go, oh, Poirier's not playing tomorrow. Oh, this guy's an idiot. They go, oh, Poirier's not playing tomorrow. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And if you do that so I think a lot of things have gone well, and they haven't had to. I think they're one of the top offensive teams in the league, and they're one of the top defensive teams in the league. They've gotten better both defensively and offensively, despite losing a lot of established players last year who knew the guys, knew the system, and knew the team. And I mean, that's a credit to that group. They've done a lot of different things, and they have a guy at the back of down in the net who they trust implicitly, and who's really repaid that trust. I mean, he's a 932 save percentage right now.
Leads the league
by a country mile.
The same thing in goals against, does he not?
Yeah, he leads the league. I think that there's one guy ahead of him in goals against.
Oh, okay.
But barely. He's like a hair ahead of him in goals.
But he's
against.
ahead in wins. He's ahead in save percentage. He's lapping the field, to use some terminology.
Hershey Bears goaltender Hunter Shepard, who's played 31 games, has a 205 goals against. Wolf's at 208. Shepard has played 31 games. Dustin Wolf has 10 more wins than Hunter Shepard has games played. He is currently the league leader in games played, minutes played, shutouts, second in goals against, outright leader in wins. His 932 save percentage is I think 0.07 ahead of Brandon Boosie, who's Providence Bruins goalie, who's up with the big club right now. Granted, he's up for the big club because it's weird. It's late in the season; they're getting weird and sitting guys. But I mean, he was the best goaltender in the American League by a fair bit last year, and he's having a better season in almost every respect this year. It's working, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, easy kid to root for, easy team to root for. They play a really fun style of game, and we talked about this in the past. I'm fascinated to see how their postseason looks, because if there's any justice in the world, that first home game they get in, at this rate, probably round 2 against whoever the weakest remaining team in their division, that building should be hopping.
It should be, and I think it will be, to be perfectly honest. And I would hope that they do them the solid. I'm not trying to create work for my friends on the ice crew, but I hope they put the W in the middle.
I think that's the plan.
Okay.
I've been told that's the plan.
Yeah.
If there's only one team playing, the team
logo
is still
goes in the
playing is
middle.
going to go up.
Good.
So
no, I look at Dustin Wolf, and I'm seeing things. You use the term generational. I've seen things from people who say that, he's arguably the best player in the world in his league. When you say something like that, and Connor McDavid's having this kind of season, it gets my attention. It seems to me he's forcing an issue here. Like they're going to have to do something for next year.
I think they're in a situation right now where they have options, and if you're another team, like effort teams are always looking for goaltenders.
Right.
So let's say you're let's say they hire you as GM for the Flame
Yep.
because they want someone who works cheap.
Yep.
They hire you.
Nobody works cheaper than me.
They hire you and they go, what do you think? I think if I call you and ask about Wolf, ask if he's available, you start chuckling, and be like, no. And you go, how about the other guy? So I think they're
Which is the other guy?
Dan Vladar. Dan Vladar signed for 2 years at 2.2. He's a good goalie. He's still young.
Yeah.
And the only knock you have against him right now is sometimes he's a little bit inconsistent, but he also doesn't play a lot.
Yep.
So if I'm a GM and I'm trying to sell another team on giving me a second or third round pick or some kind of a roster player who can help out my whatever on for Vladar, I go, hey, only thing he didn't do is he's not the guy that the coach trusts as much. And it's because Markstrom had a bigger body of work heading in. And so if you're the head coach and you're going, we got to pick one guy and we're going to go with this guy, because you can easily make a case to go with Markstrom, and it's not anything negative about Vladar.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that Vladar did not have an implosion, Vladar was simply good, but wasn't as good as Markstrom has been or could be.
Yeah.
And also didn't have the big contract. I think that's an easy sales pitch. And I think every team is always looking for goaltenders. And if you're anywhere else, if you're San Jose, if you're Detroit, if I can think of probably a dozen teams that would look hard at Vladar and go,
easily
we could use
the dollars.
If we're tandeming, if the idea is that, if the plan was always, you sign Dan Vladar to a 2-year extension, you don't know that Dustin Wolf is going to go off this year. You think maybe he will, maybe he won't. We want to give ourselves some wiggle room. So you sign Dan Vladar for 2 years at a contract you can easily move, and then Dustin Wolf goes nuts. So I think that'd be one of the positions I look at for potential tweaks, not because anything went especially wrong. I think there's tons of things that contributed to the goaltending being what it is, but I think you're looking for reasons to move this kid up.
Do we have to explain or have a conversation about why it's Vladar and not Markstrom?
A no move contract.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's and I think he was,
and it's a bigger contract and all of those sort of things. And okay.
And I think
thank you.
Not to tell tales out of school, but I think it's come out. Markstrom's wife had a baby.
Yep.
It's their first kid. I have no children. I can only imagine from talking to friends and family members of mine, the level of, regardless of what your job is, the level of apprehension you have heading into that. I think there's tons of things that you don't think that will impact you at your job that do, for various reasons. I don't want to say that's the reason because I don't know. And to be honest,
but I think he's part of the reason you're even in it at this point.
Yeah.
This play in the last month, right? I think is fair.
He was challenged to step up, and in a time of the year where he had to, he did.
Yeah.
And he's
so that begs the question though, Ryan, if it's still Markstrom next year, is that enough for Wolf?
I think it depends on who else is in the system, because the thing with Wolf is next year Wolf is waiver exempt again. He's waiver exempt for a year after that too. So let's just say, you sign a quad A guy and say, okay, here's the plan, boys. We're going to sit down and say, here's the plan, 82 games for plan. We're going to give Markstrom 45 to 50. So our plan is, Wolf, we're going to play you this many times a week, a month, whatever. And maybe, Markstrom gets hot. So you go to the other guy you go to him a bit more. So you send Wolf down for a week to get him a couple games in, send him down for a weekend. You have that ability. And so you basically need to have a goalie, the other goalie of the AHL. Maybe it's Oscar Dansk, maybe it's someone else that you feel comfortable with just bringing up for a weekend, being like, okay, you're backing up. We're putting Wolf in for this weekend. Markstrom's going to start up here. We need you to sit to back up Markstrom for a weekend. I think they have the waiver exemption to do that with Wolf for the next 2 years. If something happens with Dan Vladar where he's moved elsewhere, I think they definitely look at that possibility, because you want him playing a ton. And maybe you put him in the NHL and he has a bad first weekend. So you send him down for a couple weeks to just, ragdoll the AHL. Then you send him back up. He gets another couple starts. Like, I think with the way Boston had the benefit / curse of a lot of goalie injuries, so they kind of had to do this. But if you look at how they did things with Vladar, with Jeremy Swayman, with Linus Ullmark, with a lot of the young goaltenders there, they were using guys on the same week in one place and the other place. They were sort of shifting guys around. And you have that ability when your farm team's in Providence, you can just bring a guy up. You have that ability when your farm team's down the hallway. And so, I think goaltending is, if you're looking at any one position to go, I wonder what they do this year. I think goaltending this offseason might be the thing to look at, because I think there's a lot of really interesting things they could do.
Okay. One last one on the Wranglers, and we mentioned his name last week, but it popped again for me this week, is Connor Zary, who
19th in scoring, Connor Zary.
Yeah. Is you brought up and I think it was the conversation we had last week about Poirier that might still be, half a season away. What about Zary next fall?
I think he gets a long look. What I would do, and it's me, I'm not in charge, I don't coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious to see how Zary and Pilche and Coronado look in camp and how they progressed.
Yep.
Because, I would say if it was up to me, you put them all on a line together for some preseason games and see how they operate as a unit. Maybe you split them up into, playing with a different established forwards to sort of see, is there a big gap between them and the
Zary's center, right?
Zary can play center or wing. He's
Okay.
been used to doing a little of both. He's sort of, I would say he's sort of more of a Dubé than
Okay.
the other two guys. I
Okay.
think, but he's done both fairly well, and his ability to play both has given him a lot of flexibility. He's playing on the wing right now, primarily with Cole Schwindt and Emilio Peterson, but he's sort of bounced around a bit. The nice thing with Schwindt is Schwindt he can play wing or center, and he's a right shot. So if you can use strong side faceoffs with both of them. So Schwindt's another one of those guys I think that could be kind of a dark horse. His offense isn't great this year, but I think the challenge, a lot of guys don't have great offense, once they get to that level. But I mean, I think if you look at what made Duehr work as well this year, I think Duehr sort of figured out, especially late last season, early this season, what made him tick at the AHL level,
right,
and just focused on being good at the things he was good at. And I think with Schwindt, I think with all the changes and all the transitions, and playing with a lot of different guys, because I think they were trying to figure out what he was. I think a bit more of a consistent role would do a lot of good things for him. But I think, some guys need consistency. Some guys need to have a really set role. Some guys are like Zary, and you can say, put me wherever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like Dylan Dubé has been good at that. Dylan Dubé is a put me wherever coach. Wherever you need me to do. Some guys, everyone's wired a bit differently. So I think it's just sort of a matter of, figuring out what the niche is, and maybe the niche is utility guy. You need some utility guys. Paulie Byron's made a heck of a pro career, especially at this level, out of just being a guy who can play with anyone and anywhere in any situation. And, is he a tippity top high end guy? I don't think anyone would say he is, but is he a guy who can be relied on? Like, he was very good here. He's been very good in Montreal. He's been healthy, and unfortunately he's been healthy very infrequently.
Yeah.
But when he's healthy, I mean, he's made a really good living, and
he really has
for himself,
for an undersized guy.
Yeah, for an undersized guy, just because he knows what he's good at, and he's able to sort of be used in a lot of different roles, in a lot of different situations. And maybe it's tough if you're another team to figure out what he is, because he can be so many different things. He's kind of a chameleon. And if you can find guys in your system that can be chameleons, like your Zary's, they're pretty valuable.
Yep. Okay. What do you expect tonight?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see in the first 10 minutes.
Will we?
That's sort of the
well, I mean, we saw what happened the first 10 minutes of Vancouver, and that shifted.
Yeah, but I'd say the canary in the coal mine for the Flames is always their breakouts. If they break out of their own zone well, if they can get speed going through the neutral zone early, they're going to do okay. And if they can also stop the other team from getting any kind of speed through the neutral zone, that way that both sides of the game are going pretty well. You can't really tell the first 10 or the last 10, but that's part of the middle 180. I think the transition game is the key to the middle 180 feet that they can be so good at. And I think the challenge is, if you can click early, and you can, it's a Nashville team that did not like their game against Winnipeg. They were not good against Winnipeg.
No,
they were kind of mad about it, and they should be, because it was a game that they probably just want to erase the tape on. They'll be motivated because they're up against the wall as much, if not more, than the Flames are.
Oh, for certainly, and they have success against Calgary, right? Like they've had recent success against Calgary. Yeah. They've won in this building.
And I think if you're the Flames, I mean, you're going to go into it. You'll probably, by the time you hit the ice at 7:30, you probably know how that Winnipeg San Jose game went.
Yeah.
And maybe you're thinking in the back of your mind, okay, got to win this one.
Right.
If you win no matter what anyone else does, you win this one, you basically put Nashville down, and you only have to worry about Winnipeg.
If you don't, I wonder what Wednesday's game becomes. If it becomes somewhat of a referendum with the fans, I wonder if that could be a hostile, ugly.
If they're mathematically eliminated for Wednesday, I think we see Coronado. I think we see Pelche. I think we see a lot of guys. I think.
Oh, sure.
I'd be very curious I think a lot of the transactions on the AHL and NHL level completely depend on how this game goes. Because the Flames can't make it anymore, then maybe you bring up some of those guys we talked about. Maybe you bring up a Zary, maybe bring up a Poirier, maybe we see Dustin Wolf, because they have a lot of cap space. They have a lot of wiggle room. The only guy getting bonuses right now that'll eat up their cap space that they have left is Trevor Lewis. But if they have like 20-30 grand to play with for one day, you can bring up a lot of guys.
I did not mention this. I just saw it on my notes. Backlund is the nominee for the Masterton. I don't think there was any doubt there. That was a no-brainer.
I think maybe you can make a case for Chris. I saw some folks on social media talk about Chris Tanev too. Yeah, I think one of those two would have been the slam dunk pick.
Okay.
Backlund, I think, because he has the longevity, he has the history in the market, and you talk to him. We talked to him on Friday as a media group just about the award and about all the stuff he does off ice. He does so much stuff off ice, and he takes no credit for it. I mean, a lot of guys in a lot of markets, and not to disparage people in other markets, other sports. People do all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. For a lot of people, I think a lot of the off ice stuff they do is for optics, for the prestige, because being involved in charities, it's something that it ups your profile as an athlete. It's good for you for a lot of reasons.
Right.
Michael Backlund, I think, doesn't like getting credit for these things. We talked to him about his motivations and ideas and stuff. He was famously bringing food home from the family suites and dropping off at the drop-in center on his way home, because he's like, oh, it's on our way. And my wife came up with the idea. She thought it was a cool idea.
Yep.
He takes no credit for it. It's all Frida. The stuff they're doing with the ALS group, I think a lot of the stuff he credits to Frida. A lot of the stuff he's doing for Special Olympics, I think he credits to his family.
Parachutes for Pets. Yeah, they've been a huge benefactor there.
He credited a lot of the stuff he does off the ice to his parents and to his wife, and I think that says a lot about who Michael Backlund is as a person. But
as much as I'm going to dump on this, or we dumped on this organization for on ice and stuff like that. Who was his captain? Giordano. That was
who was the captain before him.
Exactly, and who was the captain before him? Conroy. Again, all those guys are. That's just been the way,
and,
right?
And like dating back to the guy who was in the chair before me, I think they've done a really nice job. I mean, the original ownership group, the Siemens, the Squarefields, the list goes on. Harley. I think they set a tone for 100%. This is the type of citizen you need to be to wear these colors. And I think the people who have success in this market really resonate with the fans are the people that not only perform on the ice, but are able to sort of walk the walk in the same way.
You are going to be busy as a managing editor at Flames Nation this week.
Oh, Lord.
Regardless.
Yeah, they told you that you didn't have to do any math. I guess I get to do all the math. So
you get to do all the math.
We're going to have breakdowns of where things are and where things aren't. And inevitably, I think we're going to have a lot of things sort of skewing towards postmortem.
Yep.
And, just off the top of my head, Wednesday, the Wranglers play, and they could potentially clinch first place as early as Wednesday. They're beginning a 3-game series with the
Abbotsford
Canucks. That'll close out the regular season, and then we'll figure out. So by this weekend, we should figure out what the next couple weeks look like for all the teams that call the Scotiabank Saddledome home. So it's going to be hectic.
It will be hectic,
and then we're heading into assuming that one group may or may not be playing after Wednesday, then gotta cut the body open and start seeing what didn't work.
The autopsy.
Can't do it on a living person. So
you shouldn't.
It's impolite.
It's impolite. That's right. It's impolite to start the autopsy till the person's pulse has stopped.
Yeah.
Right. And, as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah. And, I think, we'll do our best to put things in perspective with the fans. I mean, I don't think everyone went into these situations with the best of intentions. I don't think anyone was there were no villains here.
No, there's no villains.
When you're cooking a meal, sometimes the recipe don't work, and, you can get mad at the process, or you can sit down and look at the recipe and go, okay, oh crap, did I use salt or sugar here?
Yeah.
I think that'll be the name of the game for the next, maybe a couple months.
It's going to be a while. Thank you, sir. Appreciate this. Yeah, we might have to tap you on Friday. Might. You never know what happens, right?
Friday's the day I've been told too. So
yeah. Okay.
We'll touch base.
All right. Thanks, brother.
See you, man.